Yeah.
Sue, can you just resend me the link for the document pack, please? Only my tablet has died. And I'm trying to access it on here, and I've got it downloaded on my tablet, but I haven't got it on my laptop. Could you resend me the link, please?
Rob,
I can do that.
Yeah,
I can do that,
Rob.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Is there anybody else at the door, or should we start, Sue?
So,
yeah,
Chair,
Bull's here now.
hello. Oh, we're quorum. Yeah,
Graham?
Are we call right now?
We're quorate, but we are expecting. Well, it's still not yet here, Mark Goldsmith and
Councillor Price.
Councillor Price. But if we're content now that we're quorate,
it's open to you to start, Chair, if you're quorate, and others can join. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we will begin. So good morning, everybody. Just to remind ourselves that this is a open to the public meeting, and members of the public may be joining us on Zoom, but the meeting will be recorded and made accessible to the public later. On protocols of using Zoom, we've all got different experiences, but if I could encourage you to be mute unless you want to speak. When we're like this, probably the easiest is to wave your hand if you want to say something. When the screen sharing, it gets more difficult if you want to comment, because you can't see all the faces. So you might have to orally interrupt or send a chat if you want to comment. That's particularly on the statement of accounts. Okay, apologies and perhaps some declarations of interest. Kevin Price will maybe join us as the substitute for Mike Davey, who's away. I need to ask whether anybody's got any declarations of interest that you'd like to raise at this point about the agenda today. Okay, thank you. I think that was the item 1. Item 2 is the confirmation of who we are for this year. There's just one change, which is that Councillor Maguire has been replaced by Councillor Graham Bull. So we welcome you, Graham. And you and I'll try and catch up with you at some stage. And I think we should record our thanks, and my personal thanks, to Councillor Maguire, who was Vice Chair for 2 years and provided me with a lot of political nous when I needed it. So that's the membership. Our thank yous to Councillor Maguire. And now we have to elect our Vice Chairman for this year. And I have Councillor Brown has kindly said he would be willing to take on that role if I have a proposer. And if there's any other person who wants to be considered, then I would look afterwards for a proposer from them. But first, could I have a proposer for Councillor Brown? I think Ian, maybe.
Chair, I'd be more than happy to propose Councillor Brown for Vice Chair.
Thank you. And a second, do I need a second?
Yes, you do.
Okay, could I have a second? Mark, maybe?
Yeah, I'll put it on the chat. I'm more than happy to second David, Councillor Brown. That would be perfect.
Okay. And is there anybody else who would like to propose somebody? Or are we happy to take that as welcoming David Brown as our Vice Chair? I'll take that as a yes then. Thank you, David, for agreeing. Look forward to working together in the year ahead.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members. I look forward to it, and I hope you won't give me too much work to do.
Okay, thank you. So that's item 2. Item 3 are the Chair's announcements, and I've got 3 that we need to cover. Lancaster Way, which I'll ask John Alsop to give us an oral update, which was the project that we would refer to last time. I need to remind you that we need to complete our our registration of interest forms, which come through Democratic Services. Sue Hall advises that you should have all now received the forms, and we'd be grateful if you could send them back as soon as possible. And after we've done Lancaster Way, I'll refer to the item that was reported in the Ely Standard, which some members have brought to my attention. So, John, do you want to talk about Lancaster Way? You're on mute, John. You need to unmute.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as from the last committee meeting, members may recall that there was a request from the Transport and Infrastructure Committee for us, or for the committee, to arrange for an independent value for money review on Lancaster Way project. Which is a scheme which is funded by the Combined Authority, but which has been delivered by Cambridge County Council. So over the last few weeks, we've been working closely with the county and have approached a number of potential providers of an audit service. And we have identified one supplier who is we're in the process of completing the signing off the engagement contract. They will be starting their work. I think we've got the first inception meeting on Monday together with the county, and they will be starting their work soon after that. And the plan is to bring a report back to this committee at the next committee meeting.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just quickly, just to finesse that, we were anticipating it may be, it's obviously open to yourself, Chair, but obviously keen to bring this matter as early as possible to the committee, and we may be inviting you to call an extraordinary meeting rather than to use a timetabled meeting for this item.
Yeah,
Thank you, Robert P. Too many Roberts. Colleagues, members, we'll need to discuss the timelines for extraordinary meeting towards when we get to the end of the agenda, because there are a couple of items we do need to look at before our formal date of the 2nd of October. And I suppose one advantage of Zoom is it might be easier for us to be able to find out space in our diaries for a quick one, but we'll come back to that at the end. Okay, are there any other comments on Lancaster Way? Mark Goldsack.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just interested in understanding what the costs of the review are. How much it's cost us for a consultant to have a look at this?
Well, the cost will be shared between the Combined Authority and the County Council. And I haven't got the exact figures, but for the Combined Authority, it would be in the region of about £20,000.
So is that sharing on a 50-50 basis, John?
Yes, that'll be on a 50-50 basis.
So we're looking at a 40 grand cost to run this exercise.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you, Mark. Okay, so the third item I wanted to cover in Chair's announcements is the letter that was reported in the Ely Standard, and maybe elsewhere, and I've had to look this up because it's, why do they choose such difficult names? The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, to the Mayor. And whilst it was entitled Governance, when I've looked at the letters and I've talked to the external auditor about them, many of the issues are more about decisions and working practices, which are more the province of the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee. And they met actually 2 days ago, and the Mayor was present. And I think I haven't had a report back, but I know that there was quite a lot of questioning. we don't do things quite at the pace of the overview and scrutiny. So when Suresh Patel joins as the external auditor, I'll ask him to make some comments. He's read the letters, and his view and mine, independently arrived at, coincide that the majority of these issues are not governance in the sense of this committee. But there was a remark about the constitution and inaccuracy in it, and there was a remark relating to the employment of one officer when it didn't go through the employment committee. What I propose is that after this meeting, we will circulate to members the letter, the joint reply from the mayor and some of the leaders of the constituent councils, plus an analysis by the chief executive on the points raised by the minister and the assessment of what they meant. I was a little, when I first looked at this, when it was about governance, when we've looked at corporate governance so many times, I was slightly uneasy, but having read it, and I hope when you read it, you will see that with the exception of the two items I've mentioned, the constitutional mistake and the recruitment bypassing the employment committee, there were no other, I didn't read any other governance items, but we can have an update at our next meeting on the 2nd of October. And once you've had time to read the letters and the analysis provided by the chief exec, then please come back to me and we can have a considered review of it at the next meeting. On the constitution, we will get, when we get to item 9, Robert Parkin will talk to us and describe to us a review of the constitution that he's undertaking and how we as a committee can be engaged in that work before it goes to the board. And I realised, as apropos of this, that in my own mind at least, the constitution was something that was I hadn't thought that we should have had it on our working programme each year, but I think it's a reminder that part of auditing governance is to be familiar with and take the opportunities to input to any thinking about the constitution. So that's the proposal, and it's and I hope we could find that as a way forward which is appropriate given the short notice of the issue coming to light. Does anybody have any comments? Nick, you're on mute, Nick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was one of those that brought it to your attention or flagged it up anyway. I think it would be a good idea for us to see the actual text, because it's always a slightly risky situation to go on the basis of like reports in the press. It certainly, from the reports in the press and from what I've heard from other people, it certainly appeared that there were some issues about the governance of the combined authority. But I think the approach that you're outlining seems like a sensible one.
Thank you very much, Nick. And when Suresh, the external auditor, joins us, I will ask him to share with us his assessment, having had a look at the correspondence. Okay, well, thank you then. So the two letters, the letter from the minister, the reply from the mayor, and some joint signed with some of the leaders, and the analysis of the points raised by the minister will be circulated by Robert Fox after the meeting. And we'll talk about the constitution later when we get to item 9. Are we happy? Kim, did you want to say something?
Yes, could I please, Chair? I think it might be useful to consider an invite to the Mayor to the next meeting if you want to consider the issues that have been raised by the Minister's letter. So I understand you haven't had the Mayor before the Audit Committee for a while, so I think that might be a useful invitation for you to consider.
Would we like to do that? I mean, we did have the Mayor planned for later in the year, but if we, with the support of the Chief Exec, if we could invite him to the 2nd of October meeting, that would be lovely. And it would be for those who haven't have joined the committee, the practice so far is that the mayor has come once a year to open or to the start of a meeting and to make statements on the business of the time and to offer members the opportunity to ask questions. And it didn't happen last year, not least because of the hiatus caused by the pandemic. So yes, I welcome that suggestion and thank you. Okay, are we happy to move on to item 4, the minutes of the last meeting? Okay. We need to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Are people happy with them? Has any forensic eye found a mistake or something they're uncomfortable with? And my forensic vice chair has given me a thumbs up, so that's good. So we'll take those as a record. I'm not quite sure how I sign them, but doubtless Robert Fox will find a solution to that. And you will notice that at the end of the minutes, a lot of effort has been put in by Robert Fox, scrutiny officer, to represent it in a more digestible format and record the journey, if you like. So if we could go to the summaries at the end and the open actions, which are on page 26 of 164, and in the next page, our annual report, the annual report from the last municipal year is going to the Combined Authority Board next week, and I will be presenting it. If we go down the open actions on the next page, we agreed a development session on trading companies, and that will be programmed in due course. And at our next meeting, and I'll come back to this at the end, there will be a value for money workshop after the formal business, and I would greatly encourage us all to attend, because value for money and understanding what it means is in some ways key. Nick, Councillor Stamp. You're still on mute.
Yes, I apologise. I'm trying to control 2 computers and getting them.
No,
confused.
we're all doing it, sir. We're all doing it.
There's an action at the bottom of page 26 about the Independent Commission on Climate Change. I just wondered if we as like local councillors wanted to sort of input into the work of the commission or find out what's happening. What's the best way of actually doing that?
It's item 11 on the agenda, Nick.
Oh, sorry. Okay, fine. Yeah.
Which I think the chief executive and Adrian Kennard, the planning manager, are going to introduce. And I think that, and one of the reasons it's on the agenda has been I've been very conscious of no meeting has passed in recent times without a number of members raising environmental and climate associated issues. So I was very keen that we got sight of it in a formal way of the commission because of its importance and the opportunity to discuss things like you've just said. Are you happy to wait to item 11, Nick?
Yes, fine. Sorry, I should read the agenda more carefully.
It's no problem. Anything else on the action list? No. Okay. And my thanks again to Robert Fox for reorganising it. May I just make one suggestion that the open actions go at the top and the history behind, and then we can there will be fewer pages to scroll down. But that would be very kind. But thank you, Robert. It's
yes,
an excellent job.
We'll do that for next time.
Thank you. Now we don't have. Do we have the external auditor with us yet? No.
They're
So
all
you're
waiting. I can bring them in whenever you're ready.
well, as we're at the next item is the financial statements. I think it'd be useful for him to be with us for the financial statements.
Okay, and do you want Rob as
Prior
well,
to-
John?
Yes,
Yeah.
please. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm quite happy that all the people who are waiting
Yeah,
join us as soon as they're available, because
yeah.
it's an open meeting.
It
Thank
just
you.
makes it too busy on the screen, so that's why
Okay,
we delete
all
them
right.
and bring them in when they're required.
All right. Morning, Robert. You're on
Good
mute,
morning.
sir. There we go.
Sorry to add yet another Robert to the proceedings.
Yeah, no, there's a pile of Roberts for those who used to play three-card brag. And Suresh, welcome.
Morning, Chair. We've been listening patiently since just after 10 o'clock. So I heard you mention my name a few times, and I was hoping to get in,
good.
but
Dan, who we can't see.
Morning, Chair.
So we're now going to do item 5, which is the draft financial statements, which John, I don't know who of it, is it John or Robert Emery are going to take us through? And that's lead into the external audit report. And while purpose here is to receive and review the draft financial statements, which have to be published this evening, I think, in order to meet the requirements of legislation. And I hope this time the financial statements were circulated early enough for people to have a good review of them before this meeting. So, John, John Alsop, are you going to speak?
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Just to clarify, the draft accounts need to be published by the 31st of August. So we do have some time to put in any further changes that that the members might want us to reflect in the accounts. But so as members will recall, we held a workshop session at the last Audit and Governance Committee, in which we went through the draft financial statements for 2019-20 in some detail. We did highlight at that time that some of the sections were incomplete. So, for example, the pensions notes, because we had only just received the actuarial report. So these, together with the related accounting treatment of the fund values, have now been incorporated into this revised version of the accounts. We've also updated the accounts for changes suggested by Ernst & Young during the course of the audit, for example, in the narrative report and in the notes to the accounts. And also we've, this version reflects comments made by committee members at the last meeting, for example, to add further detail of loans and to provide more context into the section of officers' remuneration. I have Robert Emery, who you've just met, who is the Chief Accountant and Deputy Section 73 Officer for the Combined Authority, who was largely responsible for drafting the accounts and who may be able to help answer any technical questions on the accounts from members. Subject to any other changes, the version of the accounts that we've provided will be published as the draft version on the company, on the Combined Authority's website, together with the notice of the exercise of public rights, which will allow members of the public to ask any questions they may have on the accounts. Yeah, just for clarification, the public inspection period needs to commence on or before the first working day of September, which means that the draft accounts need to be published by the 31st of August. And the publication date for the final version of the audited version of the accounts has now been moved to the 30th of November. And then following the period of inspection and the conclusion of the external audit, we'll bring back a final version to this committee in October. I would say that, as previously reported, the financial statements show the Combined Authority in a very strong position. The balance sheet shows net assets and reserves of over £170 million, which is up 10 million from last year. Members may be aware that the board approved a refreshed and updated medium-term financial plan in June to refocus priorities towards economic recovery post-COVID. That MTFP demonstrates that we've got an affordable and balanced budget over the medium-term financial plan over the next 4 years, and the financial statements show that we have the resources to be able to deliver on that. So Rob and I are here and we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
David Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to start off by saying I found these much easier to read than the version we saw last time round. So thank you to officers for that. One specific question though, please, which is on page 58 of 164, and it's the external audit costs. I don't know whether it's John, Robert or Suresh who might want to help me with this one. I see we've had a £3,000 refund from PSAA. Could somebody explain to me what that refund was for? And does it have implications for other authorities if it's something to do with the delays we experienced last year?
Sorry, should I pick up on that? Or Suresh, I think, might want to comment on that.
Yeah, so that is a refund that's unrelated to the actual delivery of the audits in the prior year, Councillor. I think they do it every year where they, I think when they actually then work out the actual fees that were levied, and because they're not meant to sit on significant balances, they then basically rebate an element of that fee to each individual. So I think every single council who's under the PSA contract should have received some form of rebate of that, probably that similar level.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any forensic? Oh, right, Tony, yes, I was hoping.
Let me unmute myself. Hi. I've got a number of questions, and maybe that I'm covering other people's as well. But the first question was on the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. It states that the prior year was restated. Is it possible to outline what was restated? And I would have expected that then there would have been a note elsewhere in the accounts to show the prior year, the movement, and then the restatement.
I can answer that. In 2018-19, the combined authority took on the operation of the local enterprise partnership, which is now the business board, as that was a change of and the accountable body responsibilities associated with it from Cambridgeshire County Council. As that was a transfer of local government responsibilities, it was required that we show that transfer as a single line on the accounts in the year in which we acquired it, so that users of the accounts could have a comparable basis that year, so they could see all of the costs without the LEP last year, all of the costs without the LEP this year, and then the LEP as a single line. Given that the operation of the LEP is now fully incorporated into the combined authority within business and skills, that expenditure is now within business and skills for the 19-20 year. And so to make last year's comparable, we effectively had to reverse that back out and put the local enterprise partnership associated costs back into business and skills and transport. Did that make sense?
No, you were breaking up, but I can understand having a restatement to be comparable, but there should be a note elsewhere in the accounts to ensure that it's clear what the comparability is.
Okay, we can absolutely add in something in the narrative to explain why it's been restated and the effect of that.
Yeah, it's just so that you can see this was the prior year, this has been the restatement, and why it has been restated, if it's to adjust for the LEP being taken on board, what the impact is on the various lines of the income statement.
Okay, we can do that.
You had some other points, Tony?
Get to the right page. So then, I know it was one that was covered in last meeting that we wanted to have clarity around senior employees and looking at the remuneration report. Again, there's certain, I'm not going to say discrepancies, but certain lines that jump out as requiring further clarification. I mean, I would have, again, expected that when it comes to pay, that would have been split between the base, any bonus, and then any benefits, and not just wrapped up into a pay column. And also then around third-party payments, if we are using consultants, that there would be a clarification that they are all outside IR35. But certainly on the two main areas or two concerns are around clarity on the two third-party payments for the previous monitoring officer and the previous CFO, where they appear to get significant remuneration for a very short period of time. And so if that is because of a contractual arrangement whereby they were on a 6-month contract but left again 2 months, that should be disclosed in the note, so that if that's the case, it may not be the case with the previous CFO. It should state that he left at the end of May 2019 but had a contract until September, therefore the contract was paid up till the end of September, if that's what it was. Sorry, that's a number of questions around one table.
I think I'll try and address all of those. If I miss any out, please remind me. The pay figure, we don't pay bonuses to our senior or any staff for that matter. So that pay figure is simply their base pay. And then the expenses are excluded where they're not subject to tax, where they're reimbursements, and thus they are not included. If there were car allowances and things like that, they would be included separately. However, there are no such payments.
Okay, it's just that in then on the notes to the accounts on 1.41 it states that there is benefits including bonuses and non-monetary benefits, e.g. cars. So you've got a discrepancy between what the accounting note says and what the table is.
Just such benefits.
So if we're saying in accounting policies we reflect bonuses and non-monetary benefits,
it rather implies we pay them.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll remove that from the narrative because it isn't.
And also on that note as well, I just saw the note. That says within else expected that it would for settlement of short-term employee benefits.
Sorry, I missed that. Either I broke up or you did. Could you repeat that?
No. So on 1.41, the short-term employee benefits are those due to be settled wholly within 12 months. I would expect that normally to be 9 months.
We can absolutely look into that. The normal definition of short-term and long-term liabilities is 12 months, but we can have a review and check with Suresh if there's any standards for us.
Okay.
I can ensure and then add to the narrative whether the contractors who filled the statutory roles were inside or outside IR35, and include the update before we publish the draft of the accounts. And I will look into the payments for the contracted Chief Finance Officer and Monitoring Officer, and if there are payments effectively in lieu of service, make sure those are reflected in the narrative.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. I think that's where we were aware that there would be a focus on this area, and that's one thing. And then on the final point on the exit packages. I appreciate that we're wanting to have some confidentiality around packages and individuals, but it would seem, let's say, strange that on the remuneration we give some detail for those paid more than 50,000, but on an exit package we've got an exit package of 180 to 200,000, and we're not giving any disclosure around it. I appreciate we have to work within a confidentiality regime, but whether there is some level of disclosure around lieu notice or redundancy payments or payments into pension funds, just to give some granularity to that.
We can certainly have a look. I think a likely element of that will be that a significant portion of that is a pension strain, which is not paid directly to the employee and thus may not be counted in terms of or into their remuneration. But we can absolutely have a look at that, and if there are any disclosure requirements, we'll make sure they are included appropriately.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Nick Sanford.
Yeah, it relates to the same part of the accounts, the table of senior employees on page 59. I've only been on this committee quite a short period, so maybe this question has been brought up previously, but it just flags up the question with me. Why does the combined authority need to have two chief executives? Because it seems that they're costing us a total amount of remuneration of somewhere in the region of 320,000. The trend across local authorities is now for councils to be sharing chief executives. For instance, my own council, Peterborough, shares a chief executive with Cambridgeshire. So why is it deemed necessary for the combined authority to have two?
That might be a question for Kim.
Could I answer that, please, Chair, if possible? As you know, John and I were invited to take on the role of the interim chief executive in August 2018 when the former chief executive left the organisation. And at that point, we considered the role to be a temporary role for 6 months while we looked for to recruit a single permanent chief executive to the post. John and I took on the role jointly because I am also the Director of Corporate Services. So I am the Director for the Finance team and the Corporate Governance team, as well as acting up into the Chief Executive role part-time. Now, we felt that at that time, because the organisation was fairly new, it would be good to have somebody from within the organisation to continue the leadership of the organisation at officer level to ensure the continuity of the organisation, because it was a fairly crucial time for us in terms of our development as an organisation, as you know, and there was lots of press around the organisation at that time, so it was felt that continuity was necessary. But I am not an experienced chief executive. This is the first time I have done that role. And so in order to provide some support into that chief executive role, John was also asked and invited, and John's an experienced chief executive of some 20 plus years in the role. So he was invited to come into the organisation part-time also to provide that additional support. So we work jointly together. And if I may say so, I think that has been fairly successful in terms of the broad range of skills it's brought to the organisation and the changes that we have been able to effect since August 18. So that is effectively the reason, although it looks and is presented in the accounts as a significant cost, the cost of a single chief executive and a director of corporate services providing that role is greater than the two of us providing a part-time director of corporate services part-time and two part-time chief executives roles. So overall, over the cost of those posts, there is in fact a saving to the organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Any other comments on the statement of accounts? Tony? Tony? You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, just taking myself off mute. The end, sorry, I've missed it. Has there been any consideration of disclosure around any post-balance sheet events arising from COVID, but also in terms of arising from the operating lease with Alconbury having been changed, and whether the cost of the settlement and contract and mediation provisions are in place post that decision, just in terms of a post-balance sheet event for
in terms of the effect of COVID on our operations, there's a commentary added, and we've been in discussion. Suresh, as you're no doubt unsurprised here, has queried this as well. We are in a very fortunate position as in terms of combined authorities and local authorities nationally, in that the impact on COVID on us is relatively minimal. Most local authorities being funded by council tax and business rates, and indeed those transport authorities like Greater Manchester are taking significant losses to all those income streams. Because we are almost entirely funded by direct grant from central government, we are relatively insulated from those effects. So there's likely to be minimal effect on our operations going forward from it. That said, we will be ramping up certain activities in concert with central government. We have several new funding streams, such as the active transport grant coming through us, and several targeted at expanding our business services. So joining local businesses up to places where they can acquire funding, whether that's from us or other national bodies, and providing support and coaching to them to help them survive the epidemic. In terms of the surrender of the lease, as I think Kim has said to the Combined Authority Board, we've adapted to, well, we've been all forced to work from home thanks to COVID anyway, and in fact have done so without really missing a beat as an authority, as yourselves are testament to, as we're all on this call. Thus, surrendering the lease has no significant impact on our ability to deliver going forward. We are looking at interim accommodation options from constituent authorities at the moment, and will in the longer term be looking at a new location for ourselves. There are financial implications to that, of course, and there are financial savings, but there should be no material impact on the 1920 accounts. And for the 2021 accounts, the implications will be reported within those.
Any other comments from members? Tony, do you want some more? We've got another point.
Yeah, just one further one. It was earlier on in terms of the front end of the statements, where the combined authority is going through their risks and opportunities, and of course they're making reference to COVID-19 and Brexit. But my query would be, that doesn't reflect the risk register. There are significant other risks to the combined authority that are on the risk register that don't appear to make it into their accounts and their annual report. And you know, we will talk. I would expect that just in terms of the risks and opportunities would more reflect the risk register generally, but it doesn't appear to.
I think that's a fair point and a fair challenge, and as part of the, well, when we review it later today and then after this, we'll take that away and review what has been included in our risk and opportunities to bring it more in line with the risk register. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. I think it was very helpful. I stated the situation when I opened the item. We have, as we've heard, from the Chief Finance Officer until the end of October of August before they are published in draft form. I just want to check, the officers will now circulate a further copy of the statements, having taken into account the comments from members, and members will have a further chance to send anything back that they want to the financial team when they've seen the revised version. Is that correct?
Yes, we will do that. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you. Well, I think that closes item 5. If we could move on to item 6, which is the external audit update. Suresh, whilst you were waiting, were you able to listen to the conversations?
Yep.
Okay. Well, before you go into your report, would you like to comment on the correspondence between the Minister and the Mayor?
Yep, Chair. Thank you. Good morning. So, yeah, we became aware of this correspondence at the same time, I think, as members did in terms of the press article. We asked the Section 73 officer for a copy of the letter and then any subsequent information to help us understand those issues that were being flagged. We've also then received some information from one of the co-chief executives, again providing a bit more information around the issues that were included in the letter. At this stage, there's nothing of significance that we, from our audit responsibilities perspective, which is largely around the sort of value for money arrangements, which includes governance. So at this stage, there's nothing that is being flagged that we feel we need to take any action. But clearly, as we are in progress of the 1920 audit, we will and we have kind of asked to be kept up to date with further correspondence and further information being provided against those matters that have been raised. And we will report back at the October meeting, Chair, if there's anything that we think does impact our responsibilities in respect of the audit.
Thank you, Suresh. Does anybody have any further comments on this topic before Suresh introduces his report? No. Okay, thank you. And so this is an update on the external audit progress, and our role here today is to receive the update. Suresh.
Thank you, Chair. So our report starts on your page 87. And it is just a short progress report in terms of where we are with the audit of the accounts that you've just been discussing, and also my formal reporting on a matter of correspondence that I received late last year, which I think I've verbally updated the committee on, but not provided any formal output, so that's what that is. So if we go to page 89, which is the status of the audit, you'll see there where we are. We were planning to complete the majority of the audit by the end of July. I think it's fair to say that I think collectively we might have been a bit ambitious in terms of some of the early timelines in terms of receiving statements, receiving information to support the statements, and then concluding the audit. I think none of us probably fully understood the impact of COVID-19 on the ability to work at the pace that would allow us to meet those timetables. So at this stage, we have not completed the audit work within the agreed phase. And if you recall from previous meetings, I mentioned a kind of a protocol, I suppose, that we'd agreed with the East of England CFOs around if we weren't able to complete work in a certain audit phase, then we would look to complete it later on in the summer. We are now looking at a audit completion in terms of the work that we are required to do by the end of August. But as you'll see there is one item of audit work that is outside of our direct control in terms of how it relates to the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund and the assurances that we received from the auditor of the pension fund on your pension liability disclosure, which obviously are new to you this year. That work at the moment is ongoing, and there are some complexities around pension fund audits this year, and we've been told that is looking like late September before we receive that letter. So we still should be able to report to the 2nd of October meeting a completed audit with an audit report. that says that. Just in terms of being clear that we have received all the information now that we requested from the authority. So I think we referred to a couple of items that we were waiting for. They have all now been received. As you'll see there, we mentioned earlier about exit packages and remuneration. We haven't carried out the work on that area, and we obviously will be given the size of the exit package, I think that was referred to. We talked about going concern again at the previous meeting, and just again be clear, and I think as Robert has alluded to, we are not challenging whether or not you are a going concern, because clearly you are. It's about the disclosures that you make around that, and we've been discussing with Robert and John some wording that I'm not sure if it's going to go into the version that you'll see after this meeting, but I think that just lends a bit more transparency in terms of the impact of COVID on your financial position. So I think, yeah, so we're very confident we will get the work done by the end of August, and then it's just a matter of waiting for the pension fund assurance letter on IS 19 before we can conclude the audit. I'll quickly just talk about the correspondence, Chair, and then we'll take questions. So I think I've mentioned this before because it did come in late last year. So a letter from a member of the public around their concerns over loans given by the authority to East Cambridgeshire Trading Company. I've highlighted there the three areas of concerns about conflict of interest, around robustness of financial forecasts, and then the arrangements that the authority has got about the actual ability of the company to repay those loan commitments. And just to be clear again, our focus was on the arrangements that the authority has in those three areas. And then over on page 91, I've just outlined there our consideration of those three areas of concern that were flagged, and what we found and what we concluded, which on all three, we're satisfied that you've got reasonable arrangements to mitigate risks in respect to those three areas. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Suresh. Any questions or comments from members? No, well, thank you very much, and we look forward to being able to complete your work when you get the pension information. Okay, thank you, Suresh. Right, that takes us on to the internal audit report for 1920 and the opinion, and our role is to consider the report and endorse it. And Steve Crabtree, I can't see you, but are you there?
I am here, Chair. Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but no picture. Would you like to introduce your report, please?
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you. The report you've got in front of you on pages 93 to 112 sets out the internal audit works for 2019-2020. Our role as an internal audit is to establish the levels of appropriate governance and controls across a swathe of activities delivered by the combined authority. From our actual report, from the works we've done overall on 2.4, we've come to the conclusion that there is reasonable assurance from all our works. This, although we can only look at small areas of the business, we can't look at every single activity. We do select activities in all areas to get that level of assurance. So I think the key point is to say, look, we've looked at what we can, and we're giving this reasonable assurance, which, considering where the organisation came from, it's a brand new organisation, it was forming, it was been storming, it's now in that norming phase where it's starting to deliver, and the wider sort of stakeholders can actually see that. So I think it's developed really, really well, and the governance arrangements are quite appropriate. We've also, as part of this, we haven't actually identified any significant issues during the year which we need to be reported on the annual governance statement. Previous years, we reported on the HR recruitment and selection process, where we gave it no assurance. We have obviously followed that one up, and that has significantly improved. If I refer you to the appendix, since we looked at our last progress report in May 2020, the following areas really brought for members' attention. In terms of work which we finished, on 454 on page 106, we did a review of the fraud risks and we did an assessment on those, and we provided a sort of commentary and update on that one. On 455 on page 107, budgetary control has now been completed, and from the arrangements in place, we were able to give assurance on that one. Although it needs to be rolled, it was when we looked at it, it was specifically in one area of the business. That needs to be rolled out into all the other areas, and the follow-up would need to be done on that one. On 456, the project management framework on page 109, we looked at the new arrangements in place with the 10-point guide and how that was operating. Did that follow best practice? That has been sort of agreed upon, and the projects going forward are actually using those. So we've actually given that substantial assurance. Additional work, which since the last meeting in May, related to performance management, which is on pages 110 under 458. Similar arrangements there. That was a number of years ago. The combined authority established a series of performance indicators which it would be regularly reporting through to its business board and the combined authority. We reviewed those, the data collected, and ascertained if that was appropriate and still correct. And again, that's substantial assurance, and we have no recommendations on that and going forward. Finally, the last one, which we've been covered since May, was a LEP assurance. We did a review of LEP assurance just as it migrated across to the combined authority, and we identified a number of areas within the assurance framework which needed addressing. That assurance framework has now been combined into the combined authority assurance framework as one overarching document, and all the issues in there which we identified before have again been actioned. So once again, we're providing substantial assurance. I think the key message really is governance has significantly developed and improved across all areas of the business. When we first started providing the audit and providing advice to governance committee, it was a new organisation. It was developing all the time. So things were put in place straight away, and then they were being redeveloped and changed. From our works, we're coming to the conclusion there is reasonable assurance and the combined authority is in a good position moving forward. I'm happy to take any questions which you've got in relation to our works.
Thank you, Steve. I think you set that out very clearly. Colleagues, do we have any questions or comments for Steve? David Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Steve. Steve, could you just clarify something for me on pages 104 and 105, and they both relate to grant claims, where you've got an assurance level of certified. How does that relate to what we would expect to see in assurance levels of, you know, substantial or reasonable, etc., etc.?
Right, thank you for the question. Grant claims are different from providing the assurance arrangement. Certified means we've actually gone through the grant claim and the monies which have been claimed are in line with that agreement. So we've certified, we've approved it, that it was all reasonable in terms of what has been spent was appropriate.
I think it means it's a technical exercise rather than a judgment. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. There are stipulations within the grants how the money should be spent, and we've confirmed that those were met.
Thank you. Tony Mason, did you have a point?
Yeah, it was on the attempted fraud. It was there are additional actions in the report relating to a technical solution. Now, of course, in the past 4 or 5 months, we're now all working remotely, and therefore I would assume that if there isn't a technical solution put in place, the chance of fraud being conducted electronically is increased with everybody working via electronic means. Apart from the technical solutions, are there new procedures in place to minimise the phishing of emails and the submission of fraudulent bank details or fraudulent invoices?
Thank you for the question. In terms of what's been put in place, IT is provided for the Combined Authority by Huntingdon as part of the 3C shared service with a couple of other authorities. So they will be putting in all those technical solutions to deliver. In terms of how it operates, there's nothing been brought to our attention by the Combined Authority that there have been any other issues. So I can only conclude on that basis that everything is working well.
Thank you.
Okay, so what assurance then, given that there has been one email hacking, just because it hasn't been brought to our attention doesn't mean that we're not at risk of other email hackings? It appears that we're in a situation whereby we've been the victims of email hacking once, and we've addressed some of those issues. But now we're in a situation where everybody's working remotely, and the assurance that this committee is being given is that nothing else has been brought to our attention. So there could still be a risk then that there is further fraud.
Can I just make a comment, please, Chair, on just a couple of issues that we've done. So part of the technical cover arrangements has been that that all of the Combined Authority laptops, for example, are recognised by the system, and whenever another laptop is used which is outside of the system, then there are arrangements where somebody has to put in a password recognition in order to be able to get access to the system. So the previous way in which we believe the interception of the email took place, it would be much more difficult for anybody to do that, because they wouldn't be able to access our system without having a valid password to get access to that system on a separate laptop. In terms of making payments, we have put in some additional measures so that every time there is a new supplier, and there have been quite a lot recently, for example, because we are making a lot more grant payments as a result of additional funds being provided to businesses, grant payments. So we make telephone checks to each supplier to confirm bank details. So we get the information from the grant claimant, and then we double check on that to make sure that nobody has been able to access any of those documents and to change the details on the bank. If they did, we would be able to pick that up. So that's just two of the measures that we've put in place in response to the fraud.
Jack, if I could very quickly drop in a specific point in relation to information assurance and access. So one of the roles that I'm appointed to, or responsibilities, is Senior Information and Risk Officer. That involves, within its span, information security. So information security encompasses, amongst other things, access to the systems. And among the pieces of work that I'm moving forward with are an end-to-end look at information governance, including information security. So expect to be able to get into the work programme and report back to this committee on where we are on information governance, and we'll certainly look to pick up on that. But it's certainly an assurance point that John and I are closely working on, and we'll expect to give proper assurance, not just in response to individual issues, but as a wider piece. And to build on what's already there in place. It's very much me looking in to see where we are and and see if anything needs to be done. But yeah, absolutely. There's the steady state look. How are we doing? What are the issues? Pressure testing system, along with, as John's detailed, a response to specific instances.
David? Sorry, David Brown, did you have a point?
No, sorry, Chairman. Have I failed to lower my hand or something?
Thank you. Any other comments on the report, or the replies we've received from officers? Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve. I think we've introduced it well, and it was encouragingly positive in your assessment of the progress the Combined Authority has made in its first 3 years. And I did note, I think, a sort of email this morning from the Chief Executive as she was going to be unrelenting in delivery insurance is substantial. So we look forward to that in the future. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
That takes us now on to item 8, which is the internal audit looking forward and the appointment of the future internal auditor. Our role is to note progress, which, without sounding ungrateful, isn't quite as far forward at this stage as we might have hoped, given the conversation at our last meeting. But I know that feet are being held to fire. John, also.
Thank you, Chair.
Introduce your note.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this provides an update on the procurement process for the future internal audit support. As members may know, Peterborough City Council and Steve's team have been providing the Combined Authority with an internal audit service since the Combined Authority was established in 2017. And this has been conducted through a more wide-ranging financial services service level agreement, which also included treasury management services, the finance system, technical accountancy, insurance, and of course internal audit. Peterborough confirmed that they were no longer to be able to provide technical accountancy and treasury services beyond the end of 31st of March 2020. So all of the services within the SLA have been under review since then. So in terms of treasury management, we've brought that back in-house with support from Arlene Close. The finance system, we still use Peterborough's finance system, but we're looking at options for the future. Technical accounting and insurance, again, we've brought both of those back in-house. So we are at the moment considering how to get internal audit services going forward. So following the advice from the procurement manager, expressions of interest were requested through the Crown Commercial Services Management Consultancy Framework. 6 organisations expressed an interest and were invited to tender, both to provide the service and to act as the authority's chief internal auditor and to perform the tasks that we've set out under paragraph 2.6. We have received 3 compliant bids from potential suppliers, and those are in the process of being evaluated. The timetable is for us to complete the assessment, including conducting provider presentations, which the chair will be involved with, and to make an appointment by the end of the week commencing the 10th of August. And then the internal auditor will then be asked to present the audit plan, or their audit plan, at the next Audit and Governance Committee. Again, happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, John. Any comments or questions from members? Okay, and I did look to see what our duties were in regard to appointing an internal auditor, because in some audit committees I've served on, that's been part of their remit, was to approve it. But that is not the case in this circumstance. But I have been, will be invited to the final stages of the selection, so I'm engaged, and perhaps I could ask officers to also include the vice chair in the invitation if he's available and could listen in. It's an important step. It isn't for us to say yes or no, but I've been pleased that the officers are wanting to engage the committee through myself, that we can see what the process is. And it's taken a bit longer than hoped, hence my peevishness at the beginning of this item, but I'm encouraged that we're going to get what we need for the 2nd of October meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, you will have noticed, or you may have noticed, that in part of Robert Fox reorganising our lives a bit better, the agenda was grouped into audit items and finance, and now we're moving on to the governance items in our business, and that approach will be adopted in the future in organising the agendas. Now, the annual governance statement, a hefty tome, but an important tome, and given that our previous meeting, when it was on the agenda, was very long because of having lost a meeting earlier because of COVID, I wanted to make sure that members had another chance just to look at it, given it's within the context of a more straightforward meeting. So that's the reason that we brought it to you this time, and where our duty is to receive and review. And also, as we said earlier in the meeting, Robert Parkin will talk about the review of the Constitution. So, Robert P., are you going to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Chair. Very happy to do so. Chair, members of the committee, as the Chair has described, this item is coming back to yourselves. It relates to the last financial year, so ending on the 31st of March 2020, and it is a review, essentially, and a description of the adequacy of governance arrangements in place at the combined authority. And as you'd expect, it essentially brings together a number of the work areas that have been described variously earlier on in the meeting. So internal audit, external audit, and the respective roles of the monitoring officer and the chief financial officer. And it comes together in the narrative that you have in the appendix, which takes you through the history, the recent history. That's the only history, of course, of the combined authority being such a new organisation, of its inception, its early work, and developing its capacity, financial management, and audit status. It talks about a number of points, and essentially brings together those in a declaration, which is as to the satisfaction of quantity and coverage of internal audit and independent assurance work, and looks at risk management, control and governance processes. It is a retrospective document, clearly, and it does refer to the period up to the 31st of March, and so we are in obviously a fast-moving situation in terms of developing some of these work areas. It was felt that it would be useful to bring it back to the committee, although it was dealt with at the last one, to allow members of the committee to interrogate some of the points if they wished, and to talk about some of the themes that it may spur. I'm sure that John and I are happy to take any questions that members may have on this statement. I would just, if I can, Chair, just add in the postscript comments that you alluded to, which is around the work that myself and my team, with the Chief Executive of support, have been looking at around the Constitution. So one of the duties that I'm charged with as monitoring officer for the combined authority is to maintain the currency of the Constitution, to look at it, ensuring its effectiveness. And since appointment, I've worked with colleagues to develop a work programme to examine where the Constitution may benefit from updates and developments. The work is going to, among other things, take into account any external commentary, internal commentary. We're going to be speaking to the chairs of individual committees. We're going to be liaising with monitoring officers at the authority, at the constituent authorities and other stakeholders. And we'll be looking to bring that through this committee in the course of September and onwards to the Combined Authority Board. To engage this committee, this is very much a part of this committee's work area and responsibility. We will be planning workshop session to take members through, and with the scrutiny officer we'll be arranging that with yourselves and hope to take you through that in as efficient way as possible, but to encourage as much understanding of themes that we've discovered and points that we want to develop. As I say, Chair, happy to take questions, as I'm sure John is, on the governance statement or any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert P. Are there any comments or observations? Okay. David Brown?
Thank you, Chairman. There's just one point, and it's on page 125, or page 7 of the annual government statement, but page 125 of 164, about halfway down, Audit and Governance Committee, about the policies we reviewed. I think that should refer to 2019-20, not 2018-19. That's what you asked me to do.
I do. No, that's absolutely right. It's the problem of computerology, isn't it, when you copy one to another. Thank you, David. Nick Sanford.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the idea of having a workshop to sort of go through this in more detail, I would personally find that helpful, because I'm not involved on a day-to-day basis with how the combined authority functions. And I know there have been some recent changes in the creation of the committees, and I'd just like to get, some more detailed information on how the responsibilities of the committees differ from the responsibilities of the combined authority board and those sort of things.
Thank you, Nick. Because my understanding, Robert Parkin, that the Constitution will set all those things out, would it?
Chair, yes, 2 points there. Thank you, Councillor Sanford. Yeah, absolutely. We'll certainly be going through some of the detail in the workshop preparatory taking the Constitution amendments forward. We are, and it should be referred to in the work programme, looking to facilitate a workshop for this committee to encourage understanding of the scope and role of the committee, to think about developing themes and areas of focus for the work programme. That's something that we're hoping to have set up in September and just beyond. I'm hoping that the scrutiny officer can refer to that later in today's agenda. But absolutely, very keen to give all support to members of the committee and to encourage engagement with the developing the work plan.
Thank you. Anybody else with a comment? As I said earlier, I think one of the benefits of the virtual meeting is the idea of a workshop where we come together for an hour or so is probably easier to manage in one's diaries. And I'm very, when we get to the work plan, we will have to have an extraordinary meeting before the 2nd of October to do a little bit of business. And I'm conscious that it's out of our normal rhythm, but part of it is on the Constitution, which we should have a formal opportunity to talk about before the Combined Authority Board takes it in early October. And the timing is driven by that. And we've also got the Lancaster project to be looked at. So while this isn't a normal way of managing our diaries, I hope when you get the notifications of both the workshop and the extraordinary meeting, that you'll do your best. And on the extraordinary meeting, of course, we will have to be quorate. So I hope when officers put out the invitation, it's in a way that allows some flexibility in agreeing a date, which is enough for 6 of us at least. Nick Sanford.
Yes, just to minimise the impact on people's calendars, is there any way that the extraordinary meeting and the workshop could happen at the same time? Is that not really feasible?
Chair, happy to suggest. What we wanted to do is to give space between the workshop and the extraordinary meeting, so that we could develop any points that arose from members during the workshop and incorporate those into the draft. So that was our thinking on the separation. I certainly do appreciate that we are causing a few snarl-ups potentially with diaries, but we'll try and be as sensitive as possible.
Thank you, Robert. David Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Just I would agree with Robert, because the point of the workshop is to develop things, and then you can't have the committee on the same day if we're asking them to go away and change things to then make a decision on.
I think there's an element of this too, that I think Steve Crabtree talked about reaching the normalising phase. We are now getting, as a committee, stuff which is meaningful to get our teeth into, as opposed to some. I think back the 3 years, some of the formation time, it was it will happen, but now things are happening, and I'd be very grateful for you joining these 2 events when the invitations come around, and let's hope that it doesn't set a pattern for the future, but it'll allow us to be set fair for the future. Thank you. The next item, he says as he's lost it, is a combined authority board update from.
Yeah, sorry.
Mark.
I've been following the protocol and putting the blue hand up and waiting.
Okay.
To apologise.
I hadn't picked it up. Sorry.
That's all right. I'll wait profusely. It's a really minuscule point, but that now seems the best point to raise it after what Robert's just spoken. Obviously, with Kim online, I've seen various correspondences come out, and on some we're CPCA, and on others we're CAPCA. It's a really trivial point, but in a world of local government where everything is, well, I'd like to say 3-letter abbreviations, but it's 3, 4, 5, and 6-letter. You said one earlier, Chair. To me, that's the MHCLG, and that's how it's become known. Do you know what I mean? So we need to. All I'm saying is, can we just get an absolutely 100% consistent message from the combined authority as to whether we are CPCA or CAPCA, because it does get confused in the broader range thing. It's a really trivial point, but I think it'd be useful if we could just make sure that we are, the combined authority are doing everything they can to stick to one single message.
It might be small, but it's important. The naming of parts is absolutely fundamental. So who can deal with that alphabet soup question?
I'll certainly take that on board in relation to this committee, and it's CPCA all the way in terms of my understanding. So I think let's go with that.
Okay, thank you. Right, so for those of the reason we have this combined authority board update is right from the beginning. I'm conscious that we as members of the audit committee are remote from the day-to-day operational management and decision making of the combined authority. So this standing item is to give us an opportunity, or give the chief exec an opportunity to bring to life for us things of the moment and to enable us to have some insights into what's going on. So Kim, may I invite you to give your update?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Since the audit committee last met, there has only been one combined authority board, which was on the 3rd of June, and that was our AGM. So it dealt with the standard items for the AGM, which is confirming the committees and the board membership, and also the terms of reference of the organisation and the membership of the committees. So, but other items that appeared on that, you'll be pleased to note that your complaints policy was agreed. So you've made some comments at your audit committee about the complaints policy, and that was agreed and adopted by the combined authority. And I was pleased to see that coming forward. As we said, we've tried to have quite a relentless drive on ensuring our governance as an organisation since the beginning. And we have frequently submitted ourselves to corporate governance reviews to ensure that we are on track to deliver, because we set ourselves up from a standing start. And so, as the Mayor said to the Scrutiny Committee this week, the ink was barely dry on the Constitution on the first day that we walked into the offices at Huntingdon, and there were 4 of us in the team and the Mayor. So it's good to see that within 3 years we are starting now to see the internal audit team come forward with some levels of substantial assurance around the work that we are doing, and as we have said, we will continue in that frame. The most significant thing to have happened since we last met is that the board tasked the Mayor, in response to the COVID crisis, to go away and have a think about what we could do to support the COVID crisis. And as we spoke about previously, the Mayor has set up an economic recovery forum, which comprises not only members of our area, but also local businesses and the banks and various other interested stakeholders, MPs, etc., to talk about what our economic response is going to be in this area. And we are feeding that through the M9, which is a group of mayoral combined authorities that meet together regularly, into a local economic recovery forum that we are a part of together with government. So we are doing that work, but also the Mayor wanted us to look specifically at our policies as an organisation and our funding to see what more we could offer locally. And as a result of doing that, we took over a period of 2 months some in-depth review led by John Alsop and his team to look at the budget available and look at how we could alter our policy to ensure that we were counteracting that economic shock to our economy. And as a result of that, we were able to make 2 different types of business grant available. So 5.4 million towards businesses who didn't otherwise qualify for government grants, and then a micro grants, £500,000 worth of micro grants available. And these were for very small providers indeed. So your, say, perhaps your self-employed window washer or painter and decorator who was not qualifying for the grants for one reason or another. And as a result of putting those 2 grants in place, we were able to save 500 jobs locally and actually help set up a further 200 jobs locally through that. The Mayor was also keen that we look at how we could enable the market towns to provide their own COVID response, and so we repurposed a lot of our funding to provide an additional £1 million for each of our market towns. And elsewhere on our prospectus, on our agenda item, we put out a prospectus for the market towns to come forward with proposals for how they could generate generate works in their area or invest in their area in a way which would help them with the COVID response. And so we're hoping to see those applications come forward shortly. So that was the biggest area of work that we undertook. In relation to, you've already mentioned the emergency active travel as well. We had an item on our agenda to forward fund both Cambridge City Council and Cambridge County Council and Peterborough City Council to bring forward the emergency active travel agenda before we had received the government funding. And we did that because we recognise that if there are going to be some really positive moves which come out of this crisis. They're going to be around trying to get people to do more walking, to do more cycling, and we really need to enhance that opportunity as quickly as possible. So we seized upon that early and asked them to bring forward their proposals early, so that we could forward fund those works. So that was the other main part of the board decisions that were made last month, as well as we had a number of other items on there, such as investing in a retraining scheme, further information about the surrender of our lease at Auchenbury, and then several other transport programmes, most significantly around Wisbech Rail, which we are expecting an announcement on shortly. And as you may know, Wisbech Rail is an item that is particularly important to the Fenland area, one which has been outstanding for a very long time, which has never been brought forward, but we had an exceptionally good meeting with the Rail Minister, and now we are hoping, we are positive of an announcement in relation to Wisbech Rail very shortly. And that brings me on to matters outside of the board meeting. And the most significant issue that's going on outside of the board meeting at the moment is the Gateway Review. And this is a part of our assurance framework as an organisation, and a way in which we differ from many other local authorities, because we were set up in such a way that we have a responsibility and an accountability, a direct accountability to government, and in particular to MHCLG. And so once every 5 years, they are going to come round and assess what we have done and what we are delivering, to ensure that we're delivering that in line with their expectations, what was set out in the devolution deal, and to ensure also that we're getting value for money. And so the Gateway Review has been very active throughout July, with independent commissioners coming around and speaking to lots of our partners, lots of businesses locally and other stakeholders, to see if there is a visibility around what we're doing and an understanding that our priorities are directed towards the sort of infrastructure projects that people think need to come forward to improve the area. And so Wisbech Rail is part of that, that development of that Gateway Review, and a part of our priorities for the area that we have seen and have been talking about as part of what we've been delivering. And I think we're at a stage now, even though we're only 3 years in, the Gateway Review has come forward early, because this being the first term of the combined authority, and in particular the first term of the mayor, they have wanted to undertake the Gateway Review prior to the 5 years, in order to ensure that we can have future funding going forward. So we are actually undertaking Gateway Review after only 3 years. But we were able to write to the Minister recently, setting out a number of things that we have delivered as a combined authority. So our first 3 years hasn't just been focused around our setup and getting our working arrangements correct. It's been a relentless focus on delivery. And so just to give you a flavour of some of the other things that we've written to the Minister about, so we wrote to them recently about construction work on the restored Soham station, and that's about to begin in a matter of weeks. We put forward a build programme when we first decided to prioritise Soham Station as one of our key priority projects, and we've actually taken 6 months off of our own original build programme, because like the government, we think that infrastructure developments can take an inordinately long time to come forward, and we have been seeking ways to shorten the build programme where we possibly can. And before the combined authority came into existence, it was about 11 years since the first formal study work on reopening the Soham station began, and we have managed to deliver that. We also, you may have seen the announcement for the launch of the Peterborough University, and coming from Peterborough City Council myself, I know that that is a project that was talked about when I arrived in Peterborough in 2009, and that had been talked about for possibly 20 years at that time as a project that Peterborough would really like to see coming forward. And we now had the official launch with the Minister during the last month, and we will shortly deliver the Peterborough University spade in the ground in October. We're also going to be publishing a business case for the A10. This is a programme also that I know many of the councillors in East Cambridgeshire will tell you that Councillor Roberts was telling me that his father was former Councillor Roberts, now Councillor Roberts, who works in the Mayor's office, was telling me that his father was a councillor, and they were talking about the dualling of the A10 very, very many years ago, and we are now making it a reality. I've mentioned the Wisbech Rail, and also in Fenland we are undertaking a number of projects around the 3 Fenland towns, key junction improvements on the A10, work on Peterborough Parkways. We're going ahead with the station quarter work there and supporting that as well. So there are a number of, I think, very positive messages that we have been able to feed into government and to the Gateway Review. And I think the only other significant matter that I probably should bring to your attention, although you have had discussions around it this morning, is about the ministerial letter, the letter that came to us from the Minister. And just to give you some brief background to that, John and I were asked to work with civil servants earlier this year on a number of concerns they had raised with us about the governance of the organisation. And many of these you will be familiar with, because they related to matters that have either come before this committee or the scrutiny committee, and they range from items like the departure of the former chief executive, which, as you know, was the subject of an external audit review, and many discussions as well at the scrutiny committee, to the mayor's charity ball, and to the matters that are now in the letter around the employment of political assistants. And we have, you will see from the information that will be sent to you, the letters that will be sent to you, we've now whittled all of those and been through, had a thorough review of all of those with the civil servants, and we've now whittled those down to essentially 5 issues, which I have set out in a schedule to MHCLG, where we are still seeking some clarification on them in relation to those matters. I think we were at a point now where we were able to feed those matters into our constitution review, because I think that we are certainly seeking this certainty from MHCLG. There is nothing that the combined authority has done that is unlawful or that is outside of sort of, I don't want to say usual practice, but there is nothing that we have done, I think, which has misled the authority or would do anything which is outside the boundaries of what we were permitted to do. The discussions that we've had with MHCLG have largely been around clarification of the decisions we took, many of which were backed up by external legal advice. And through the course of those discussions, we've agreed to make amendments to our constitution. And as we move forward, and you will see those amendments come through, we will discuss with you in detail what they were, so that you can be satisfied yourselves and ask any further questions that you like in relation to those particular items. So happy to disclose not just the latest ministerial letters, but if you would be interested in seeing the earlier discussions with MHCLG, I've put those together into a package, and I'm happy to disclose those to you. And as Suresh had indicated, I have contacted him as soon as this letter was released to say, these are available to you. I'm happy if you want full disclosure of all of these items. So thank you, members. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Kim. Nick?
Yes, I've actually got 3 questions. It's probably easier if I ask them all in one package. The first one is about the forward funding of the walking and cycling improvements. Could you just clarify exactly what is happening there? Because the Peterborough City Council Scrutiny Committee recently resolved to actually ask the combined authority if, in addition to the money that the government's putting in for walking and cycling, whether the combined authority could actually allocate some of its own funds for that. Point number 2, it's really good to hear about the Wisbech train project. I think that's been talked about ever since I've been involved in the council, which is quite a number of years. Just one question on that. All of the indications I've seen about how the service would operate talk about trains running direct from Wisbech to Cambridge. What about trains going from Wisbech to Peterborough? And the third point is it's obviously really good news that we're going to have a university in Peterborough, but my understanding is it's going to be a branch of Anglia Ruskin University in Peterborough. And can you confirm whether it's going to have any student accommodation? Because if it doesn't have student accommodation, then I think it raises a question in my mind: is it a proper university, or is it just designed as a college for people in Peterborough?
Kim, please.
Apologies, yes. Thank you. Yes, in relation to most of those items, Councillor Sanford, there's a lot of detail behind all of those. And I think the best thing for me to do would be provide you with a written response in relation to those from the directors who are involved, because as you imagine, these are moving forward day by day, these projects, and so I'll get you the most up-to-date written response to those. In relation to the university, I think it's important to clarify that yes, it is in conjunction with Anglia Ruskin, and that's because it's actually a requirement of a law that we have these they're called maternity arrangements, as it were. So you can't set up an independent university from scratch. You have to have and work in conjunction with an existing provider, but with the intention that eventually that will become an independent university. And Anglia Ruskin is fully aware of that arrangement and has been assisting us and will be assisting us with moving towards a fully independent university in due course. But on those other items, I'll come back to you with further written detail.
Thank you, Kim. Mark Gilsek.
Thanks. Yeah, just a number of quick points. Just one very quick one on the Anglia Ruskin. What I know about them, they're already doing what they're planning to do in Peterborough, in Chelmsford. You know, so they've got a proven track record there. So I see this as tremendously exciting for particularly Peterborough, and well done. Just a slight flippant moment. Soham Station. Soham is my county ward and my hometown. And I married in 1986, and my mother-in-law recently showed me a newspaper from the week we got married, and the headlines in the Soham Advertiser, which is a subchild of the Ely Standard, said Soham to get a new station. So it's been around for quite a long while. Kim, I keep banging a drum at county, and I think it's absolutely right also for the combined authority. There are many positives that have come out of the COVID lockdown period, and one of the biggest one of these is the response and the attitude that has come out of community and the people in the community that have really stepped up. And I think with many of this, we've never got a better chance to speak directly with people who are active and really busy supporting people in their community. So in answer to the combined authorities question as to what can you do, to really help the community, you'll never have a better opportunity of speaking to people in the communities and getting those answers back. Because I would be very surprised if we haven't got a parish in Cambridgeshire that hasn't had its own little voluntary sector that grow out of that. And they are a great resource. So don't miss that opportunity, Kim. And I'm sure Adrian Chapman at the county will willingly help you and put you in touch with things like that. But that's a really valuable thing. Lastly, and I don't mean this as a negative, but I mean this as a positive for moving forward. The market town strategies are extremely welcome. The extra cash, extremely welcome, etc. I have met with quite a lot of resistance and annoyance locally here in Soham as to exactly how they have or have not been delivered. Understand the combined authority can't do everything, but they went out via our friends at East Cams, and really and truly there's been no correspondence with the parish or town council. There's been no correspondence with other local elected members. Whilst I think it's a decent document that's come out, I just think in terms of democracy and in local things here, we've missed some opportunities there, I think, for a wider input, which could have helped you guys spend the money better and probably more wisely. Is that okay?
No, thank you very much for that feedback. Actually, that's really useful. All of that, thank you, and I'll certainly feed that back to the relevant members and officers.
David Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. You couldn't let me. You wouldn't have expected me to let that last bit go without commenting. Yeah, Mark, we're very conscious of how we got to where we got to, but I think it's important that people understand those were high-level documents. The nitty-gritty of how to spend the money, that's where we need to be consulting, and that's where we will be with Surrey Town Council, amongst others, and we've got to get everybody on board, yourself included.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you, Kim, for bringing the texture of the business that's going on at the moment. It does exactly as I always hoped, is that it gives us the context in which we're doing our audit and governance work, and the opportunity for a bit of feedback. So thank you again. Now we've got 3 items left on. Sorry, Ian.
Thank you very much, Chair. One point I could just pick up on something Kim said. You said that in the Growing Fenland project there are 3 market towns in Fenland. I was under the understanding there are 4. I hope Chatteris hasn't been left off the list there. Should be March, Chatteris, Wisbech, and Whistlesea.
Yes, sorry if I have done that, I apologise. Yeah, you're right. I did say 3, so I do apologise for that. Yeah, and you're exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's fine. Anyway, I didn't want Chatteris to miss out on any funding. Thank you very much.
no, and you know, Chatteris has been very much in the forefront of my mind as we move forward on the CAM project. As you know, there is proposals to put a route through to Chatteris as well, if we possibly can, and that's something, you know, we are very much keen on exploring at the moment, as well as a route to Peterborough. So yes, sorry, I apologise for missing.
No, that's fine, Kim. And can I say that as a Chatteris councillor, I am very appreciative of what the combined authority pumped a lot of money into Chatteris over the last year or so. It is appreciated by local people, and we hope this will continue. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We've got 3 items left on the agenda. Are we happy to plough on without a break? I take that as a yes, no? And I'm sure there's enough flexibility in our virtual arrangements if you need to. So the next item, have we got Adrian Cannard joining us, or is it just going to be Kim introducing the Climate Change Commission?
Adrian's on the line if you want him.
Yep. Okay, well, I'll hand over to Kim on this item to bring us up to date on this important piece of work by the Combined Authority.
Adrian's just joined you.
Thank you, Adrian, for joining us.
Yes, thank you. So, Chair, I was literally just going to introduce this item to say that Adrian has really been putting in all of the hard work around the Climate Change Commission. So I'm going to ask him to have the opportunity to explain the work he's done, which I think has been excellent. So hand over to you, Adrian.
Thank you very much, Kim, and hello to the committee. Yeah, just you've got the item in front of you, which is setting out the procedure we've gone through in terms of establishing the commission. I think the key thing I wanted to bring out was the high caliber of the chair that we have managed to secure for this vital piece of work for the authority. Baroness Brown leads the adaptation committee of the National Climate Change Committee, which advises directly to government on climate change issues, and she has a number of other prominent roles in the climate change sector. So we have got her in place. I've just come directly from the inaugural meeting of the Commission, and some very enthused participants, but going to be extremely busy and challenging period, I think, for us, given the breadth of issues that climate change touches, particularly in terms of not just the Combined Authority's own direct actions, but also our role as a convener and leader of issues. And one thing that came out very strongly from this morning's meeting was to have strong recommendations back that the Combined Authority can use to influence particularly central government in releasing more powers and abilities for localities to deliver on climate change action, and to influence other partners who will have a major significant role in emissions or in mitigation. So really the report is very much an update of the procedure, but we are underway, and no doubt there will be further reports back as we get into the meat of the actual activity.
David Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for that introduction. It might just be me and I've missed it somewhere, but would it be possible to send around a note of who else is on the commission? And also covering that, just a sentence or so of if people have got ideas they want the commission to consider, where should they send them?
Yes, certainly can do that. And within the Combined Authority, I'm the point of contact for ideas to come in to distribute to the Commission. So I will make that clear in the documentation.
Mark Goldsack.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. Really welcome the establishment of the board. I think it's really good, and I wish you well with the journey. Our friends and colleagues, and I've lived on the edge of the Fens all my life, but our friends and colleagues in the Fenland area, I'm sure Councillor Benny will have something to say about this. Obviously, this is going to be a key area of focus for you, because with the recent redefinition of carbon emission calculations, the land in the east, the farm peatland in Cambridgeshire has become basically the highest source of carbon emissions. But we've got real issues in terms of the social, the economic, the food security aspects of all of this, and we've got to be absolutely clear in how and why we manage that, because it's absolutely integral to the society of the Fens, of the Fenland area. I just welcome your assurances that we're not about to suddenly whack that with a complete change.
So I can assure you that the whole issue around the Fens and the peat was raised robustly this morning in the Commission meeting, and they have agreed that they will have a specific piece of work looking at the whole issue of the Fens and the peat in particular, recognising the social, economic and the environmental issues that all overlap. So you can rest assured that that is something that the Commission has already grasped as a key issue for them to consider.
Well, I think the other aspect, coming back on that, Adrian, is that as with most things, nobody will understand and have a better feel for what's going on than the people in that Fenland area. So I would absolutely implore the Commission and you guys to make sure that there is regular and open dialogue, with Fenland councillors, other elected bodies in that area. It's absolute. Listen, farms. Nobody understands these issues better than the Cambridgeshire County farm estates of 33,000 acres. We've got farms all around the area as well. So we've got an awful lot of information that we can add into you guys.
Thank you. Ian Benny.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I welcome this as well, but bearing in mind, as Councillor Goldsack has clearly stated, that we've got farms which are the biggest source of CO2 in the area. I hope we don't get hit with a blanket target that then cripples other areas that would hold back and hinder. I think there's an awful lot we can do, and I do welcome the board's hopefully intervention in this, because there's a lot of things we can do which will be benefiting socially and economically and for the welfare or the well-being of local people. If this is implemented properly, I think this will bring in a lot of very, very good schemes into Fenland. And County are putting in the cycleways, money's coming in from there. But these kind of schemes, which is taking vehicles off the road, that can also be brought into a leisure aspect as well. And I think that is something that I hope to see, but I wouldn't want to see a target that's based on a national figure that then our farming target throws everything else out and holds us back. That's one thing I would not want to see.
Thank you. It's an exciting topic, but of course, given our focus, whilst those wider things are of interest to all of us as people and our roles in life, it's not, the committee is more about, our role is more about the processes and the governance and the internal controls. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Nick Sanford.
Yeah, I think my question follows on from some of the previous questions actually, and it's about the process really, because I appreciate the Commission's only had its first meeting, but has it decided, how its processes are going to actually operate? How, for instance, my full-time job is I work for an environmental NGO, so there's a lot of NGOs who'd be interested in input into this process. I'm also conscious as a Peterborough councillor that on some of the other exercises that the combined authorities engaged in, like the local transport plan, like the review of bus services, we as Peterborough councillors don't seem to get consulted, or we get consulted at a point where the report has already been published. So could you ensure that that consultation happens?
So the Commission this morning did debate how it would engage and how it can get the widest sign up and buy into its recommendations. So it's asked for some further work from us to map that out. So they are very conscious of the need to get widespread support and engagement on their recommendations, because it won't be just Combined Authority looking to deliver activity. It will be a combined effort across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So they very much set out their stall in terms of that level of engagement.
Thank you, Adrian.
Can I just come back on that? Yeah. Just in terms of engaging with Peterborough, can you make sure that you don't just engage with the administration in Peterborough? Because I think that's what's been happening in the past. The engagement has been with a small group of councillors, but not sort of with all groups.
So the some of the lessons learnt from the Economic Commission were set out by Jane Patterson-Todd, who helped co-lead that support, bringing that forward, and she set out the approach that Commission took to engagement, which included a whole public facing exercise. So we'll certainly take those points back into that discussion to the Commission.
Thank you, Adrian. Earlier comment was you circulate to members who's on the Commission. Could you, and remembering that we as an Audit and Governance Committee are about what were the processes used and will be used by the Commission, rather than the more exciting stuff which Overview and Scrutiny gets to work on, which is about what decisions they made. And we always have to remember that discipline on this committee. But could you just describe the process that was used to assemble the Commission in selection?
So we've previously reported on the chair selection. You can see that in the report. What the origin of the process was set out by the delegated power by the board. That also included a terms of reference which scoped the type of commissioners that were needed. So a certain number that would represent community interests and a certain number that would represent business interests. We developed a role profile to identify the sorts of interests that we would need on a commission, and we've gone through a process of identifying individuals to fill that balance. So at the same time, trying to satisfy ourselves that we had a good spread of interests across different sectors, but also the board itself was a diverse board in terms of characteristics, so that we had the best chance of representing the different interests across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. The individual commissioners are obviously not representatives of specific organisations. They are appointed on an individual basis to provide that level of robust debate. So that process went through and has been documented and recorded in a officer decision notice that we've taken through the standard procedures.
So in shorthand, is that tapping on the shoulder? You've identified people and approached them, or was there some open opportunity out there for people with these interests to apply?
So in terms of the approach we took, it was a view that we needed to get the right expertise, and so it has been an approach of identifying, with the advice from the management group, which includes a range of academia and other interests, to give us a steer on likely candidates. We did not run a fully we did not run an open process in that sense of advertising for commissioners. We identified the sectors that we thought we needed the expertise from, and then looked to see who would meet that role profile within it.
And is that a model used elsewhere, or is that best practice, or does it still sound like tapping on the shoulder?
I mean, I think it was a view that to get the right people, we need to identify the interests. And so we did see that as an appropriate way to take forward. We, as I said, we didn't decide that an open process would give us any advantages in speed in setting up the commission. So we focused on the expertise gaps that would needed. So I don't consider it tapping on shoulders, because it was done in terms of meeting those individual sector interests rather than any other process.
Any comments, anybody? Nick?
Yes, I was quite happy up to that point, but I'm now getting a bit concerned, because if you don't, I appreciate there has to be some form of selection process where, you know, you try and ensure that you have a balance of different viewpoints and the different areas of expertise. But if you don't have some form of initial open opportunity for people to apply, you know, you say you want to choose the right people, but how can you be sure that who the right people are doesn't in some way reflect the intrinsic prejudices of the people who are choosing them? I think, you know, the absence of an open process does give me some concern.
And I spent 10 years in a research organisation, and I did learn that what you thought people could contribute and how they actually did contribute often varied with the perception you had. And I do think I share Councillor Sanford's view that you could have defined the characteristics you were looking for, as you obviously did, taking advice from your management group, I think you called it, and then you could have had an open competition. So I mean, it's water under the bridge now, but I'm not sure. I think there's been a theme in my mind throughout the 3 years I've been associated, an anxiety that we make sure that things are open and transparent, because there are a lot of groups working in the umbrella of like the town development committees and what have you. And I do think it's incumbent on us as an audit and governance committee to be satisfied that there is proper openness and not anything that could be led to criticism of why did he or she have it and not me when I didn't have a chance to apply. And we have to try and avoid that sort of criticism. Paul Rains.
Yes, so, Chairman, these are all very legitimate points you're making. I suppose I just wanted to go back to the way you framed your original question, which was, had we followed precedent and common practice? And all the points that have been made notwithstanding, I think the answer to that question about precedent and common practice for an appointment of this kind is yes, that is what we did do, and this is a standard way of approaching these appointments. Although obviously the comments you're making on that kind of process are, have their merit.
No, could I please just add something there, Chair?
Some
because
light
clearly,
would be lovely.
Yes, I have been working with the team on this. I think there were, I think the point is that this is an unremunerated body. So what we are trying to do is draw a whole series of experts into a group that will give some confidence that all of the representations they're going to hear will be absolutely grounded in their expertise and their vast knowledge of this subject area. So I think when you're putting together a board like this, you're looking for a different kind of board. Obviously, if we were, if for example, you're looking for a chair, and they are remunerated, you would absolutely expect that to be an open competition. But I think in this case, what we were doing is we were trying to move towards a governance framework that I think is accepted. I mean, if you think about how the government puts public inquiries together, they will often draw on people, and they will look for and target people that they want to bring into and head up their inquiries that bring the right level of expertise, because everybody will have the opportunity to contribute their views and opinions. They don't have to be on the board to contribute the wide views and opinions that there will be about this subject through the work that the Commission will do to engage with the public and bring all of those forward. So yes, we would like to engage with people who have those opinions, but I don't think it's necessary to run therefore an open competition, because you are looking for a very select type of board in this case. So that's the reasons that we took when we wanted to move forward with the board. I think there is a distinction to be drawn about perhaps a remunerated body with a wider set of interests, that you're looking to do a piece of work for you, a wider piece of work. This is a very, very niche piece of work at the moment, and we're looking for a particular type of expertise. I think one of the other influences was that we wanted to ensure that there was a good female gender representation on the board as well, and that does involve a certain level of targeting of people to bring them onto the board, and so that was a factor as well that played some influence in what we were trying to do.
Any comments from anyone else? I thought it was important to probe this, and I think can we be confident that in other such things like town development groups that were early on in the work of the combined authority, is there a distinction drawn? But is the model that's used for the Climate Commission used elsewhere, or is elsewhere all groups that are sponsored or working on behalf of the authority are open competition? I think understanding that balance would be helpful.
Yes, I think it's important. I think what is important, Chair, is that when we set out how we're going to set these up, when the report goes to the board, we perhaps need to be more explicit about the recruitment arrangements that we're going to employ in order to bring people onto these boards or these working groups. You will see, for example, that going next week is the board report on the CAM special purpose vehicle, the company that we're hoping to set up, and there we have completely identified the recruitment process and how we're going to go through that recruitment process to bring the chair and the board members onto that company. So I think it is important that we perhaps are more explicit about that. I think the only distinction we've drawn so far in the way that we've done these things is that if it carries remuneration, you must absolutely go out and have an open exercise. Where we have an unremunerated board and we are approaching people to give their time free of charge to help us bring forward this this very, very important project, that perhaps we are targeting those who are willing, and we're looking for the willing, rather than necessarily going out and doing a full recruitment process.
Everybody's got their hand up. So is there, because a lot of these things don't come through the committee, neither should they, but in a process and internal control point of view, do you think there might be some value in having a note to us on the models of recruitment you use for the different types of groups that the combined authority, so that from a internal control point of view, we can see what the authority's intentions are, and then it can be that can be the policy which is enunciated and has had the benefit from comments from this committee. How does that sound?
Well, Chair, if that question is to me, I think that's entirely correct, actually, and I think probably that's something that we can feed into the Constitution review, because there is a section in our Constitution on working groups, those that are made up of members of the combined authority and those that are made up of members outside of the combined authority, and we perhaps need to elaborate further on our processes for bringing those groups together, and where we may select one type of process for bringing people onto those working groups as opposed to another.
Okay, thank you. I think that would be helpful. Nick Sanford. Nick?
Yeah, I think I still remain unhappy about the process. I suppose really the thing that's ultimately going to matter about this process is the recommendations that come forward and whether any meaningful contributions to tackling climate change happen. But I think, I'm hoping that the Commission might come up with some recommendations that are quite fundamental and even controversial in some areas. And I do think that, someone at some point may well raise the question, well, who are these people that are recommending this, and how were they chosen? And I think that's where the sort of absence of an open and accountable process does give me some concerns.
Thank you. I think we've noted those comments, and I think we'll take them away. And as we look at our constitutional procedures, we'll take those into account. So thank you for those.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Kim. I wonder whether we could just do perhaps a little bit more on the Commission itself, because it's hit the ground running now, from what Adrian talked to us, and it's deciding how it's going to be working as a process and how it will consult, and the timelines presumably. Now, these are internal control items. It's not our business in this committee about what decisions they make or what conclusions they come to. Those are a responsibility for other people. But I wondered if we could have an update on the processes they're using at a future meeting, not an argument as to or an explanation as to, but just this is what they've decided. These are the processes, and then people on this committee can at least understand and can provide feedback if they feel that they could be modified in some way. Is that a fair
Chair, that's
task?
Entirely fair, and I think also what the committee has expressed an interest in the past is how we are feeding the climate change risks into our risk register. As you know, our process to date has been to look at each project that we deliver individually in terms of the climate change risk, and so you will see, and our strategies, so you will see in our local transport plan that we address their mitigation around climate change in the local transport plan. We don't have an overarching risk around climate change at the moment because we have chosen to address it through the individual delivery of modes. But clearly you as a committee have expressed an interest in that, so that's something I think as well that we could report on as we go through the process.
Because we don't, I'm never the one who wants to keep taking the plant out to see it grow because it kills it. But I think just having a short paper about the way it will work and when, once now they've assembled, would be helpful. If not October, then the one after that. And I'm sorry if any of this line that Adrian and Paul has found. This is an objective. I'm a disinterested party, but we do have a remit as this committee to make sure that those governance processes are understood. And it's not for necessarily to say whether they were the right processes, but in governance is about deciding what you're going to do, showing you're doing it, and allowing somebody to come along and say, yes, that's the way they behave. When they make some outrageous proposal that will stop everybody going to such a place, I'm glad that's for overview and scrutiny and the board, not for us. But I'm very grateful for your input this morning. Thank you. Are we happy to close that item there? Okay, lovely. So we will actually segue nicely what Kim said onto risk, and who Robert, Parkin and Francesca, are they going to talk to us on this?
Yep, I can lead off, Chair. I'm happy to do that. So
this is Francesca. Oh, this is Francesca.
She's available and she's going to come in shortly.
Thank you.
So
I'm just arriving.
Okay, so yeah, the Audit and Governance Committee's terms of reference include monitoring the risk management arrangements and the risk register itself. So we bring this risk register to you for review and comment. It goes on to the Combined Authority Board for approval and noting. So today we're bringing you the revised risk register. We obviously keep it updated. It's essentially reviewed by the corporate management team, and there are processes whereby risks are escalated through directors to the corporate management team onto the corporate risk register. There are additional risks arising in relation to the environment in which the authority operates. Clearly, the COVID-19 pandemic has been key. Shortly, Francesca, I'll invite her to take us through on the screen the revised risk register. But just before I do so, I just wanted to just update you with actions that have taken place since the last time this committee reviewed the risk register. We've conducted meetings with the corporate management team to review the current risk register and how it's to be managed moving forward. We've agreed a way forward. That's involved separate meetings with individual directors to discuss their specific risks and to populate them into the register appropriately, ensure that we understand the proper residual risk and the nature of the risk, and that that's properly understood and profiled. We've added in an additional column for residual risk to take into account mitigation, so that we can show, hopefully more clearly than has been in the past, where the risks come down, basically. And as I say, Francesca's really expert in this area, and we'll take you through shortly. For the wider authority, risk management clearly needs to be in the minds of anybody working around the organisation, and as part of ensuring that, we've started by delivering under Francesca a training session which took place this week. That's to remind colleagues of the risk register and ways in which risks can be escalated, notified and understood, and that will clearly be something that over the next period and into the future we'll look to appropriately return to with officers. So if I can, Chair, I'd like to just introduce Fran and ask her to turn her screen on so that she can take members through the risk register as it is and receive any comments and questions. So over to Fran.
Thank you, Robert.
And
hello,
members might need to be, if we've got the risk register on our screen sharing, you might need to send me a chat or something if you want to make a comment. So Francesca, welcome, and please go ahead.
Sue, I'm unable to share. Can you pop me on as co-host, please? Can everybody see that, or do I need to zoom in? Sorry, Jono.
Zoom in, I can't read the print.
Is that better? We're all happy. So
could you just go in one a little bit more? Sorry.
Happy. So as Robert has mentioned, this is the current corporate risk register. I'll go through the differences. So what we've done is we've ranked the risks in order of the RAG rating, starting from highest to lowest. So as you can see, we've got 1 red score, 4 oranges, I believe, 5 oranges and 4 greens. Which is a significant reduction since the last time we showed you this risk register. The only risk item that is showing red is the impact on COVID, on the disruption of delivery of the projects. The reason why we added in the residual risk score is because on the previous corporate risk register, we were only showing the score pre-mitigation. Adding the additional columns to show the residual score post-mitigation probably gives everybody a better idea as to how high that risk is for the organisation, which is the reason why there has been a significant decrease in risks across on the corporate risk register. So like I said, we've got the top one, the red one, being the COVID-19 pandemic, and the 4 of the 5 other orange ones are the ambitious and long stall programs cannot proceed due to lack of government funding or in private investment. The unplanned significant increase in costs lead to requests for additional funding to the combined authority to enable schemes to proceed, access to gain share funding, and then the external delivery partners do not meet deadlines or budget. So they're the current orange risks on there. There's one more, sorry. Which is the absence of resource planning and financial management. As Robert mentioned, we've given each risk the RAG score, and we've also given each risk a action owner and a risk owner. So the action owner is responsible for the mitigation, and the risk owner is responsible for each individual risk. So between the 2 of them, they hope manage that risk and hope to mitigate it. If anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Francesca. Unless members want it, maybe we can take the screen sharing down so we can see each other and ask. We've got climate change be added. This is from David Brown. Where are we with the climate change risk that we talked about and that Kim referred to in our introduction, or when we were talking on the last item? Are you reaching that point where you will have this climate change risk, or are you still following the practices Kim outlined of integrating it into each of the particular risks?
Kim, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, I'd be quite happy to take that, Chair. Yes, we are at the moment we are following the process that we have previously discussed, which is that rather than look at a single risk for the whole organisation, we look at, of course, how does climate change manifest itself, or how does climate risk manifest itself? It manifests itself through the way that we deliver our infrastructure projects, and so therefore we think that the more sensible option at the moment is to look at each project individually and look at the way in which we can mitigate the risk of climate impact through the delivery methods that we're employing. What I think the group discussed, the leaders discussed, was that they didn't want to move straight away to declare a climate change emergency, because that's often it's a very nice statement, but what action is it actually backed up by? And unless you've done the thinking about what action plan you're going to put in place to mitigate that climate change emergency, it's nothing other than a statement of words. And so what we wanted to do was take a more sort of forensic look at how that risk manifests itself, try and address that through our strategies and our projects. We will, of course, be feeding that into the Climate Change Commission work, and if they come up with any recommendations about the risk register needing to address this in a different way, then we will, of course, take that on board. But we would rather wait for the outcome of what the Climate Change Commission is doing before we make any decisions to change the way that we've chosen to operate around climate change risk. But of course, that is a matter for, if the committee has a different view, I will, of course, and we will, of course, take that back to the board members.
David Brown, did that answer your point?
Yeah, that's fine, Chairman. As you say, this committee is about process. We'd asked for one. I just wanted the answer as to where we got to with it.
Okay, thank you. Nick Sanford, you had a point?
Yes, it links into the previous one really, because we did ask as a committee if the officers could consider putting climate change onto the corporate risk register. I can appreciate what Kim's saying. There is an argument about whether you look at it corporately or whether you look at it within each individual project. But just on the process issue, I've noticed in the corporate risk register, you've got COVID is actually on the corporate risk register, and it seems to me that, you know, COVID is a global pandemic. Climate change is also a global issue, both of which impact on the combined authority. So what is the rationale for having COVID on the corporate risk register but not putting climate change on there?
Because I think it presents, the simple answer to that, Councillor Sanford, is it presents an immediate financial risk to the organisation, because there are economic threats which we can already see coming forward as a result of COVID, and those are therefore a direct and immediate impact that we need to have moves in place to mitigate those. And at the point at which we put the risk register together, we didn't at that point, or, you know, we needed to address those mitigations. We are addressing the climate change mitigations already through the way that we are addressing our approach to climate change risk through individual projects. So that's the slightly nuanced difference between those two.
Okay, thank you. Tony Mason, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it is disappointing that it's not been put on. I realise that there is the commission ongoing. I do have some reservations with regards to climate change being in individual projects, in the fact that individual projects can actually multiply the impact of climate change. If you think of expanding the A10 to dual carriageway being dealt with individually from building new houses along the A10, in actual fact, as a combination, they impact the risk of climate change locally. If we're talking about environmental emissions or the impact on what we now see as a very low environmental water within the East Anglian region, you know, building new houses impact upon the availability of water to those houses. I think the Commission and this committee, you know, we are looking at the framework, and part of that framework should be that there is an overarching visibility of the target set by the combined authority on climate change, that then it can be measured on those individual projects. You know, around the governance and how the board responds to those risks and opportunities arising from climate change, and also then the individual strategy and risk management and mitigation, going down into then metrics and targets that the combined authority has for climate change, then being measured against those individual projects that are being delivered by the combined authority. I mean, going back to the previous discussion, I think I'll forward on something that I'm working on at the moment, because one of my roles is looking at implementing the recommendations for the task force for climate-related disclosures that is going to come into corporate requirements in 2022. And part of that is looking at what the boards of listed companies have as their overarching strategy for climate change. Not individual tasks, but how do they move away from a greenwash into actual activities that are measured and delivered at a board level. And that's what I'd expect the combined authority and the board and this committee to be looking at. That's for somebody else. But we should be looking at those overarching governance frameworks that are delivering then a required climate change.
Could I come back on that, please, Chair? You're absolutely right, Councillor Mason, and this is exactly what the Climate Change Commission is one of the things that they've been tasked with, and it is looking at the overall impact of growth on climate change and means to address that. Because that, you know, if you having interviewed Baroness Brown, I understand that the pressures on water is something that is particularly of a particular interest to her. You know, she is a resident of the area. She does understand the climate pressures that we're under here, and so it's an area she is particularly keen to address. I think that therefore they are tasked with really taking that global look at what we are doing as a combined authority and looking at, and we are geared towards delivering growth. It's written into our devolution deal that we are going to double GVA. Therefore, they are tasked with looking at whether we can have sustainable growth, and it's something that the Mayor in the interview with Baroness Brown was particularly keen to impress upon her, that it can't be growth at any cost, it has to be sustainable growth. And in fact, are there ways that we can completely mitigate the impact of growth? And we would like to look at that as part of what the Climate Change Commission are doing. So if that offers you any assurance around what you said, I think yes, that they are going to look at that. I think I think what you have raised is exactly the key point that needs to feed into from this committee into that Climate Change Commission, because it raises your concerns about the way that the combined authority is currently choosing to address that climate change risk, and you'd like it to take a different look and a different approach, and perhaps the work of the Commission will lead us to that different approach. I think if we could almost capture verbatim what you have just said, I think that you could feed that as a written request into the Climate Change Commission for them to address as the concerns of this committee going forward, and I'd be happy to support that.
Thank you. Any other?
If I can just, what I'll do then, John, is I'll share. It's only a 12-line document with Adrian, yourself, just so that you can see the framework that I'm looking at, and then it may be something to review and take forward, or say that it's not appropriate.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tony. I think it's important for the record to try and encapsulate the fact that we had an explanation of the rationale of where the risk for climate change is handled at the moment, and that there was feedback from the committee expressing perhaps unease that this wasn't necessarily the most appropriate way of depicting it, and that we will give feedback to the combined authority for seeking insights from the Climate Change Commission on how one would best describe and capture the risk for the combined authority. Does that is that the flavour of our discussion? Good. And I think I'd like to thank Francesca, because although we had to blow it up on the screen, I now get the sense we've got a proper strategic type level of risk, and that by putting them in the order, one can now see what the combined authority think are their top 3 or 4 risks. Management's challenge then, of course, in my experience, is then you've got to get everybody on the team to understand what are the current 3 risks of the organisation, because it only gets traction if these sort of things are talked about apart from the time you're looking at the risk register. When are we next looking at the risk register? Due to look at it.
Chair, sorry,
Robert. I was going to say we do take it at every meeting.
Okay, lovely. And I'm sure members are too, that we're now getting a better picture because it's no longer a long sea of red. And I'd just be grateful if when we get the short covering paper next time, I always think of it as like top of the pops. You know, you want to know the movers and the risers and the ones. So as well as the new items, if there's a move in where they sit in the seriousness order, or they've dropped down, that always I have found helpful in trying to take a view on how risk sits within the organisation. Can we manage that, Francesca?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll happily do that.
Thank you. Are we happy to close this item? And what we were doing was review and recommend any changes, and I think we gave that a good outing. Thank you. And now we got item 13. I hope that's still that it was 13th. Is a work programme, and Robert, you're going to introduce it. And Robert's done a lot of work on the representation of the work programme, and so I'm sure he'd welcome feedback if you think it can be improved even more. Robert?
Yes, since the last meeting, as the chair just referred, we've worked. Oh, Councillor Brown wants to come in early.
Sorry, I was intending to signal that I do want to come in after you've introduced your report.
Right, so worked with the chair to present the work programme in a different format to provide commentary basically on the last 2 years. So we take, rather than just presenting this year's work programme, presenting last year's work programme as well, which enables more of a cross-reference between items that we've received previously and then we're going to receive again in the future. I think that's a helpful way of presenting it. Obviously, we've discussed a couple of items today that need to go onto the work programme. For example, the mayor being moved forward from the December meeting. I think he was scheduled to the October meeting to enable him to answer any queries from members on the MHCLG correspondence. And there was a couple of other items which obviously will then reflect in any update to this presentation. I would be very grateful if members could provide any feedback from how it was previously presented to how it's presented now, and whether or not they do feel it is helpful to present a work programme as a retrospective as well as a forward-looking document.
Thank you, Robert. David?
Thank you, Chairman. In answers to Robert's question there, request for comment, yes, I think it is always handy to be able to look back and compare to what we were doing as a committee last year to make sure it's, well, particularly where it's things that we need to be looking at on an annual basis where they fit in. I do prefer the style that this has come out in, but you know me, there has to be a couple of things I've picked up on.
Good.
On page 157, suggests that on the draft financial statements, we were being asked to approve for 2017-18, not 19-20. And then on page 160, I thought we changed the date of the April meeting in 2021 to the 6th of April.
You're on mute, Rob.
Help.
Sorry, yes, that was changed at the last CA board. So yeah, I'll need to just reflect that in that work programme.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else got comments? No. Okay. Well, I think it would be very helpful to us as a committee and to Robert if you could let Robert have any feedback on presentation, and because in one sense you get a better journey, but in another sense there's quite a lot of integration, and we've got to find the right balance so it's good for us as the reader and doesn't bog Robert down in too much process in order of producing it. Robert, you wanted to speak?
Yes, and what I was going to say is when the minutes are produced, I'll actually also attach an updated work programme to that to reflect the items that we've discussed today.
Okay, thank you. Happy? So, as I'm about to close the meeting, just my encouragement for the workshop on the Constitution and the extraordinary meeting attendance. And at our next meeting, scheduled meeting on the 2nd of October. After the business, we'll have a development session on value for money, and it will be a Zoom event. So I hope that will make it easier for members to stay on, because it is a key facet of our responsibilities, is the test of value for money. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you at a constitutional workshop before long. I close the meeting. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.